Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Welcome into Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. This week's edition, your host Scott Wardell in studio and guest Jerry Johnson with us for the second time, as I remember. Welcome to you both and hello, how are you?
We're doing great. This looks like it could be one of those last great fall days. It is so beautiful
It's fantastic.
outside today. And I know that we've got some, not terrible weather coming, but boy, when you get a day like this in November, you just got to appreciate it. It's really wonderful.
At the same time, it's hard to appreciate it when you know it's the last one. You're trying to hang on to it before, May, when next time we'll see 50s maybe, but
that's right.
What a great day.
If you recall, it was this weekend last year when we got our first snowfall, and that turned out to be the snowfall that stuck with us all year long. So, and it was a very wet snowfall, but I know that my wife was describing to me that a year ago she was driving down to this fair or this whole event that happens at St. Patrick's Church down in Shieldsville, and she drove through 8 inches of snow to get there, and that there were just ruts on the road and through the snow, and you hoped an oncoming car between the two of you could get out of the ruts to get back in your lane. That was a year ago today.
Yeah.
And,
unbelievable.
So it's really crazy. But here
we'll take sunshine in mid-50s.
Compare that to what we've got going today. It's absolutely fantastic.
How's the apple orchard, by the way?
Well, good. As a matter of fact, the apples are picked, but I still have a cooler full of apples. But
okay.
And they're really, last night I was bagging some up actually for this fair that's going on. I think that's the right word, but maybe not. And frankly, I ate a few. I thought as I'm bagging them up, I'm like, man, these look good. And
yeah.
so I took a few treats myself, and I said, they're perfect.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott Wardell, your host for Financial Strategies today, and our guest, Jerry Johnson, we'll meet him in a minute.
Right.
Before we get started, though, Scott, listeners have experienced some tough and wild weeks if they're invested in financial markets. I know things in Greece have just been interesting.
Yep.
Some elections overseas, too. Italy have really affected those. Is there anything we need to know or do to help insulate us from those market volatilities?
Well, one of the things, and I keep saying, I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but you got to make sure that you've got good, broad diversification, and that you built defense in your portfolio, because this was another just absolutely crazy week. When you look at, a day when you're down almost, 4%, three in a high fraction percent on the stock market, and then you get a day of recovery, and then you get another day of recovery. I mean, this kind of volatility we have had for some time. It is appearing to be the new normal.
Up and down and up and down.
To have this wild volatility and have, things like Greece, things like Italy. We are in international markets, like it or not. Most big companies, whether they're U.S. companies or international companies, they have international trade, a lot of it. And so, if you're a U.S. company and you got 40% of your trade international, then these things are going to affect, our stocks here as well. And of course, everybody's worried about, will this lead to some kind of a European recession, which would be hard on everybody. And then as soon as they do something right, and they, kind of our backs are against the wall kind of strategy, we've got to, get a hold of this. I mean, imagine in this country if, in the course of a week, we install a new government. I mean, this is crazy when you really think of, what kind of dramatic steps they're having to take. And that, of course, is why we are so really concerned about our own federal deficit and what is going to be done with it, because countries often don't take action until their backs are against the wall. But things did even out there because they've taken some dramatic measures, but I have to put something on everybody's radar. We're going to get more volatility, I believe, here in the next couple of weeks. You know, this super committee that has been really directed now by the President and Congress to really make the appropriate budget decisions, they're due by November the 18th. That date's coming up really fast. So if you remember the whipsaw on the market that happened in the first week of August because they couldn't come to a decision and everybody is speculating whether or not they're going to do it, this probably won't be quite as dramatic because there's no threat of a government close down. And the reason there's no threat is that they've actually put the debt ceiling out there so that it'll get us actually past the election, past next fall's election. Having said that, the U.S. government needs to look strong and competent. And competent means the ability to make a decision and make some recommendations. In lieu of them coming out with some good recommendations, I believe the market is going to be very, very nervous. Not like necessarily what it was in August, because the whole debt ceiling and closing the government is not the issue, but it's still, we still have got some impending things. Couple that with a day-to-day, events in both Greece and Italy, and we could get a lot more volatility. So my message to people is make sure you've got broad diversification and make sure you have built in the appropriate defense into your portfolio. So that doesn't mean that you're not going to experience some of these ups and downs, but hopefully you can cushion a number of them, and hopefully the big picture, and that is, will my money be there when I need it, will be far more predictable and far less subject to the whims of this wild and emotional market.
Sure.
So
we want to welcome in our guest to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell today. Scott, we have Jerry Johnson with us, huh?
I'm so delighted when Jerry joins us here because, he's got just a wealth of experience. And I should have asked you this before the show, but you're a Hall of Famer, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Thrivent has this special designation for people that have got the experience like Jerry that they call the Hall of Fame. This man's in the Thrivent Hall of Fame. I mean, seriously, this is the guy.
This is the guy.
It's not like being Harmon Killebrew.
But we're just delighted to have you on. And today we're going to talk about the tax triangle. And, people may have heard a little bit about the tax triangle or tax diversification. If you, Jerry, could just spend a minute, and by the way, just thank you so much for taking the time to come down and visit with us here today and share all your wisdom and experience with our listeners. Let's jump right into it because we got some good stuff for people, and so that if people are looking at how to improve my overall financial situation, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but the ultimate thing is how do I get more for my own uses? And one of those things is how can I potentially pay less in taxes? And that comes to the tax triangle. So Jerry, tell us what it is and, a little bit about, how we might use it.
Well, as Scott said, the tax triangle is a way of doing another level of diversification. Many of the financial advisors talk about asset allocation and diversification. In fact, Scott just finished that this morning related to the I don't know if you use the word crisis or not, but certainly the volatility in the market.
Right.
Where the tax triangle comes in, if you can envision a triangle, of course, I'm a 7th grade math teacher, so triangles have 3 sides and 3 corners.
How long has it been, Jerry, since you taught 7th grade math?
A long time, maybe 35 years.
Well, you didn't forget.
But they do have 3 sides and 3 corners, and I want to deal with the 3 corners.
Right.
You'd envision each corner of the triangle and label one of them tax now, one of them labeled tax later, and one of them labeled tax never. You would end up with what we call the tax triangle. It becomes a very lopsided triangle because most of the people have very little in the tax never column or corner. Much of what they have through IRAs and 401ks ends up in the tax later, and what we have in the bank and in non-brokerage accounts ends up in the tax now. You don't get a deduction for putting it in, and you have to pay taxes on your interest, dividends, and capital gains on an annual basis.
Right. So that, as you said, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs for school teachers, 457s, all of these different retirement accounts, and people have really because they're so automatic, and for many people, the contribution, that's the part outside of maybe the value of their home, or if they own a farm, that tends to be the biggest part of their net worth for many people as well.
Yes, and fortunately we have that tool because it is convenient to do through payroll deduction or automatic systematic investment, and so you are accumulating dollars. And an added incentive for the tax later column is that you don't have to pay income tax on what you're putting into it on an annual basis, and you don't have to pay taxes on the earnings that it might make while it's accumulating.
Right.
But there's a price for that.
Exactly. So what we're really talking about here today is a lot of people that have done really the right thing, and that is that they have participated in their 401ks. They put money into IRAs. They've accumulated, as you say, this great big bucket of tax later. And it's one of those things that it happens because monthly deductions and just a regular accumulation over time, it really takes a different level of what I would say strategic planning to step back and say, okay, this is working and it's giving me my tax deductions, reducing my tax bill, but is there a picture that I have to look further forward to? So let's for a second, let's go to someone who is in that accumulation stage of their life, and how does the tax triangle affect that group of people? And we're going to also talk very heavily on those people that are in the latter stages, the retirees and as well. But let's say you're accumulating, you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. How are you affected by this whole thing?
The advantage of the tax later bucket for people who are in the accumulation stage lies in the fact that they don't have to pay taxes on what they're putting into it. And that's appealing because come April 15th every year, we're a little bit disappointed about the smallness of our return if we do get one of those, and if we don't get a refund, it's how much more we have to pay. And so not having to pay taxes on the contributions causes lots of us to put all of our money into the tax later bucket.
All of the spare discretionary kinds of funds, right.
The cool part that's come out of the tax law in the last 5 to 10 years is a concept called a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, and that is a product that fits up in the taxed never bucket. And actually through your 401k, some employers allow you to make your personal contributions to the Roth 401k.
Right.
The benefit is that when we do get to retirement, it's in the tax never bucket. The cost of that is you're not getting a tax deduction for those contributions.
Right. And Jerry, one of the things that we've said on the show here in past weeks, and I want to emphasize it at this point, is that when you start to order the first things that you should do to improve your financial situation, albeit you might, if you have some very ugly, nasty, high interest rate debt, like credit cards, although that might be the first thing that you would take care of if you were to do an assessment, if you had that kind of debt. The next thing on the list is making absolutely sure that you're getting 100%, and I say 100%, you're getting all of the matching funds that are available to you through often the Roth IRA. So, I mean, not the Roth IRA, excuse me, through the 401k. I misspoke. I'm glad I don't have to say 3 things this morning because I might not remember the third.
Yeah, but you're not running for president.
Right, that's right. But our point here is that although you end up building up potentially a lot in this tax later bucket, and I know you're going to go deeper into this discussion about the Roth 401k, the 401ks provide such a great ability for people to accumulate wealth during this accumulation phase that we're talking about because of those matching dollars. And what's interesting to me is I often will sit down with folks that don't know that they've got any plan like this available to them. And it's just missed dollars. It's dollars left on the table. Do you ever run into that?
Occasionally. This is one of the things that we really want to help people find is how many dollars can they put away on a regular basis. Employer matches to 401ks are a wonderful tool. They actually do replace the defined benefit plans that our parents and grandparents perhaps benefited from.
Right.
But there is an effort on the employer part to help you put some money away. I am not advocating that everything you have should go into a Roth IRA,
Right.
but I'm certainly not advocating everything you have should go into a tax later bucket.
Absolutely.
And
I got, excuse me, I have to tell you one quick little story about a client I was working with, and we had a lunch appointment at her office, and she works for one of the, well, I was going to say community colleges, but it's I'd say technical college. It's what we used to call technical colleges, and now I guess they're have changed the name on some of these. But at any rate, I said, are you certain that you don't have some form of matching funds on this particular account? And she says, oh, I'm pretty sure. And I said, you know, we're in the building. Why don't we just walk down to your human resources department and ask that question, because I would hate to have you miss it, and it'll take us all 5 minutes to check it out. So she said, sure, well, let's take a walk. So we walked down, we got into human resources, unannounced, by the way. They gave us that look like, well, who are you and why are you in our office? And I asked a couple questions and found out, now it isn't much, but there's $350 per year that she's eligible for the match. She has sufficient cash flow to get it. She signed up before we left the office, you know, so it's just one of those things. Dig a little deeper, and you might find something. You know, that's like, you know, it's a little better than finding a $20 bill in your sport coat.
Car insurance payment, or yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Sure.
So that's, you know, just to make sure that people look at that. But, and your point is very well taken here, is that, you know, even as they're contributing here, you got to have this on their radar. You know, am I going to pay tax on it later, or is it potentially tax never? And these Roth options on the 401ks, and, you know, Jerry, do you have any sense of what percentage of 401ks now offer the Roth? I don't run into them all that often. You know, from where I sit, I'd say 20% or less.
It's becoming more popular. It's an uphill battle, and 20% is probably a good number. One of the pieces that many people don't know is if they are self-employed people, they actually can qualify for a solo 401k and contribute more money to that on for retirement than they could in a traditional IRA, and some of that they can set up their own Roth solo 401k. That's
cool
for the self-employed people.
Very cool tip. And when we come back from our break, because I guess we're going to take a break right now, we're going to talk about the tax triangle for retired, or even a little bit about right pre-retired. So listeners, hang on. We got some good stuff coming up for you.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Welcome back into this week's edition of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell, our host, and guest today, JJ. We're talking about the tax triangle, which is tax now, tax later, or tax never.
She's a good student, isn't she?
I knew that the triangles had three corners, so I was able to follow that way.
That was good description. JJ, you did your job well.
You're a great teacher. Thanks, JJ. So we were just talking before the break about those people that are gearing up for retirement, that are still in the savings portion of their retirement savings, I guess, and what they need to know about the tax triangle. We're talking now about people who are actually in retirement. So, JJ or Scott, if someone's retired, how does the tax triangle affect them?
The tax triangle has a really negative impact for people who have a large amount of money in the tax later bucket when they come to withdrawing it, because anything and everything they take out of it is taxable. So imagine that you're roaring into a retirement and you've got Social Security and you're drawing out $2,000 a month out of your IRA or 401k plan, and you're very comfortable with it, and you decide you need a new car.
Right.
And if everything is in the tax later bucket, Now you have to take out $30,000 to buy a $25,000 car
At
or
least.
something.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that becomes really painful.
Yeah.
And at the time that you hit retirement and you have most everything in the tax later bucket, there isn't a lot you can do short of taking it out of that bucket and spending it, having to pay taxes on it, or taking it out of that bucket and do what's called a Roth conversion. But in order to convert it to a Roth, which is the tax never bucket,
Right.
you have to pay tax on it now. So if you go back to our triangle with the three sides and the three corners, if you put your finger on the tax later bucket, in order to get it over to the tax never bucket, it's got to go through that corner that says tax now.
Right.
And that's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think your key point here is that it's far better if you've got a long view and you build them up in each particular category. But there's certainly those folks that have built up the tax later bucket and do take advantage of the Roth conversion.
Right. And another piece I would say, it all's not lost for the people who have the majority of their money in the tax later bucket, because many people, if they would look at their income tax form, will find out that they're probably not as in a high a tax bracket as they believe they are, based on news media telling us we're all being taxed to extinction.
Right.
We're probably not as in high a bracket as we think we are. And secondly, we may not be filling up those lower buckets. So working with a tax professional to find out how many more dollars you actually can take out at your current rate,
As you turn, tax bracket, exactly.
and then use that to help do a Roth conversion can help people who are nearing retirement or actually in retirement get some money from the tax later bucket to the tax never bucket. You have to go through the tax now corner,
Right.
but it may not be as painful as you think, and it's certainly not an all or nothing deal.
Well, and this is a really good time of year to start taking a look at that, because you can, if you figured out with your accountant as an example, and I know you do, JJ, you work with, people's accountants very well, and I do as well, where we make a lot of those phone calls and say, okay, here's what my estimate looks like. How much room do they have inside of this 15% tax bracket before they hit the next bracket? So let's say that it's, $6,000. Well, then what you might want to do, and it's a maybe because it depends upon the rest of your situation, you might want to convert 6,000 now this year and 6,000 next year, because here's what's looming on our horizon is that right now the tax brackets and what we refer to as the Bush tax cuts go through the end of 2012. That includes a lot of things. That includes capital gains taxed at 15%. On 2013, if they don't extend those credits more or they don't pass any new legislation, they go back to some former rates. If that happens, by the way, people are going to be, generally speaking, not everyone, generally being pushed into higher tax brackets. So we've got really 2 years here right now, and I'm not saying that they're not going to continue them, but let's face the facts. The government needs more money. If they can automatically get more money by not passing some legislation, and you take a look at it and you say, well, what are the possible outcomes? Well, at this time, about this time, in 2012, we're going to have one of two things. We're either going to have a re-elected president who pretty much will want to increase the tax rates for some, or we're going to have a new president-elect and a lame duck president. That
will
frankly,
turn over time.
Yeah, exactly. In either case, I don't see those the Bush tax cuts getting put in for 2013. So I think that if you're a betting man, I think you'd say in 2013 we're probably going to see some higher tax brackets. If that's a probability again, not a certainty, and you are in a particular tax bracket that's lower now, I would really spend some time with your financial advisor, spend some time with your accountant and say, are there some things I can do now in 2011 and extend into 2012? And maybe it's part of this conversion, because it could be, and I'm not trying to prognosticate Congress and the tax code, But it could be that this is an opportunity at lower rates that we won't see for a while, that we should take advantage of. Any thoughts on that, JJ?
I concur completely. Many people are not taking out as much money as they can in the tax bracket they're in.
Right.
And the meeting that Scott and I were at the 3-day meeting at the beginning of this week, we heard from former Senator Simpson from Wyoming and Erskine Bowles,
right.
Two really big-time people who are interacting with the super committee,
right.
trying to help the super committee to come to some conclusion. And they believe that the Bush tax cuts will have a hard time being extended.
Right.
In the form that they are.
Right.
So what we're saying to people is the time to do your tax planning is not Easter.
Right.
It's Halloween.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that and drive that point home is when we turn our stuff for 2011 over to our tax person in January, February, and we get the results of it on April to turn in our taxes, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes accountants will say, oh, geez, you coulda.
Right.
Well, the time to learn what you could have done is before the end of the year. So in our practice, we're stressing with lots of people, let's look at your income tax estimates in the fourth quarter to find out, is there room to do something, and then help the member decide whether or not they want to do something.
It's a great point. And, of course, the exception to the April 15th rule is that IRAs, of course, can be deducted up to April 15th for the prior year. So that's the one exception. But your point is so well taken, because what I've noticed is that people's incomes, let's say, have been a lot more variable in the last couple of years because of some things that might have happened. So, I'm working with a couple where one of the two is not employed and ran out of their unemployment benefits, and so they're having a particular down year from an income tax standpoint, and might be able to actually take a little bit of those lemons that have been dealt to them and turn them into lemonade by saying, well, maybe this is year to do a little bit of Roth IRA conversion, but let's work with your accountant to get that figured out. And of course, we have a lot of farmers that are listening to us here as well, and of course, their incomes can be very variable dependent upon what expenses they pay in any particular year, and of course, how profitable their crop is. So there's some things they can do between now and the end of the year to adjust where their actual taxable income comes in. Your point is so well taken. So, this is the time to do that tax discussion and that tax planning. So thank you for that. JJ, let's take this tax triangle into the next dimension here for clients looking to their heirs. So, okay, let's say for the moment that I'm 70 years old and maybe 75. I've taken the tax deductions when I was working, built up some IRAs or some qualified plans. Now I'm taking the money out and I start looking towards my heirs. How does the tax triangle going to affect my strategy for passing wealth on to the next generation?
The tax now column, due to the step up in capital gains basis, will pass for the most part, in all likelihood, income tax free to the heirs. The tax never corner of the triangle is going to be tax never, so that passes tax free. However, the tax later is still going to be tax later,
right.
Which means it doesn't matter if I take it out or my kids or my grandkids take it out. There's going to be income tax. And once we get to the point when we get past the required minimum distribution and realize that we're probably going to have some money left, then we look to people to say, when you have to take money out due to the required minimum distribution, we should be looking at the strategies that get it from we take it out, and if we don't spend it, we have a choice of putting it in the tax now column or the tax never column.
Right.
Most people, when we point this triangle out to them, are saying, how do I get it into the tax never? Because it's been in the tax and I have to take it out. I don't want to pay tax anymore. How do I get it into the tax never?
Well, and JJ, one of the things that is that when people, the whole strategy behind tax deferral and tax deductions into things like 401k is, hey, in my big earning years, where I'm in a higher tax bracket most likely. When I'm taking it out, I'll be in a lower tax bracket. And what you're really saying here is, now I'm looking on the horizon, and we have a phrase here we use on the show pretty commonly, and that is the first few years in retirement, you're thinking about how long will my money last. And in the last or the middle part of retirement, you start thinking about how long will I last. Well, when you get to the how long will I last, that gives you a different view of your money. And part of it is, well, this money's probably going to last past me, and it's going to go to my heirs. And gosh, I look around and my kids are successful, and they're earning good incomes, and they're going to have to pay tax on this, and it looks like they're in a higher tax bracket right now than I am. So I think that's where you're talking about here is, how can I absorb some of this tax now, maybe in a 15% tax bracket, instead of put it on to my kids who might be in a 28% tax bracket.
Don't know if earlier in the show I mentioned or not, but there's a limited number of products that are in the tax never bucket.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The three that seem to jump out at me are municipal bonds, and as long as the current tax code is in practice, we will deal with, if you buy a Minnesota municipal bond, there's no state or federal income tax on it. Roths, whether they're IRA contributory or Roth conversions, they are tax never also.
Right.
And a piece that often goes unnoticed is the cash value of life insurance and the death benefit of life insurance. So when we get to the point, how long will I last, and we're asking that question, and we realize we have money left, what is necessary would be to sit down with your advisor and talk about which makes more sense, Roth conversion, or to utilize in some way, shape, or form some kind of permanent life insurance.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take another quick break, right, Steph?
We are.
And but when we come back, we're going to get a little bit more into some of these tax-free strategies. We're going to revisit that, and we're also going to talk a little bit to explain to people what these required minimum distributions are that you've been talking about here, JJ. So hang on, folks. We got more good stuff coming up.
And this week's special offer coming too.
And this week's special offer.
Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell continues next.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Welcome back. This week's edition of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Host Scott Wardell here with us, and guest JJ on the Wall of Fame we hear at Thrivent Financial. We're talking today about, go ahead.
The Hall of Fame.
The Hall of Fame.
Right.
Well, I was picturing your face on a wall. That's what I was picturing. He's in the Hall of Fame. We're talking about the tax triangle today, which again is about tax now, tax later, or tax never. Before we get back into it, though, we have a special offer every week.
We do, and today's offer is a little booklet that we put together called Start Seeing Your Financial Future in 3D. What this is called is the 3D diversification strategy. And so here are the three things. First, the investments and how you can diversify them. Second, of course, your time and how time is relevant into your planning. And the third one is
I knew it was coming. I knew that was coming. You have it in front of you, thankfully. You can cheat.
The third one is diversify your taxes. And we, I don't want to be mean about that. It was just an interesting event of this week. But
definitely
the third
was
one
They
is
don't make mistakes like that often.
Right, exactly. So it's diversify your taxes. And the very thing that JJ's been talking about here today is that taxed now, taxed later, taxed never, I think is very, very well explained in this particular little brochure. So it's free, so people can call this toll-free number 1-855-346-4332, and we will get this out in the mail to them. Obviously, leave us name and address, and a phone number is also very helpful because sometimes we don't get, it doesn't come through very clearly. I know that someone called in from Dodge Center one day, and it got written down as Sauk Center, and we couldn't figure out why we kept getting this thing back in the mail. So
just go to Sauk Center, darn
right,
it. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's called Start Seeing Your Future in 3D, Financial Future in 3D. So all you need to say on the recording today to get this booklet is to say, send me the 3D brochure, and we'll be more than happy to send that out to you. So before our break, oh, there is one other thing, by the way. And that is, a lot of people have requested that we make available to them the events that we've got going on in their listing area. And if you go to Thrivent.com / find an event, all the events that are listed throughout the state of Minnesota and into the Dakotas, all over the country are there. And all you have to do is click on your state and your location, and Thrivent.com / find an event, and you can, and it'll be listed what's upcoming. And you can actually, if you want to, sign up online for these events. So
That's
I encourage
helpful.
people to go there as well. Okay, so before our break, here's what we were talking about. We're talking about the tax triangle, JJ, as it pertains to our heirs. And I think a couple points of clarification that I think would be good for you to make. First of all, describe, as you're talking about taxation to heirs, the clear difference between this income tax that you've been talking about and possible estate tax. And then I want to get a little deeper into this Roth conversions.
Okay, thank you, Scott. The concept that we've been talking about up to this point has all dealt with income tax. And many times we run into people who are a little confused because they read in the news media they have the capability of passing down $1 million or $5 million or $3 million without tax. The phrase should be they can pass that down without a federal estate tax, which implies an inheritance tax, not income tax.
Right.
Everything we've talked about until this moment today has dealt only with income tax, and everything we deal with from this moment on today will deal only with income tax. But don't be confused that you, just because you don't have in your minds $1 million or more, the kids won't pay any tax. They won't probably pay an inheritance tax. But depending upon the property that they inherit, the taxed later bucket, they'll probably have to pay some income tax.
Absolutely.
And they'll pay it, not you.
And thanks for that clarification, because that is so commonly confused. I cannot tell you the number of times where I was describing to someone, some of the strategies for their estate planning that they might need to take a look at, and describing the income tax. And you get to the income tax piece exactly like you say, and you say, well, wait a second here, but my estate isn't big enough. You say, whoa. Different tax, folks. And I think the ultimate point of this is there's a lot to navigate here. There's a lot to navigate in terms of your retirement income, your taxation on your earnings, how you pass it on to your heirs. So I encourage people to do one other thing in addition to send for this brochure, and that is call one of the qualified financial consultants, financial representatives in your area, and sit down and talk this through with them. So because this is not the kind of thing that you're likely to figure out on your own, although some people do. I'll give it to the few, but it takes a lot of research and experience like yours, JJ, to get this done. So I highly, highly encourage that. So we were talking right before the break about the three different kinds of things, kinds of investments that are inside of the tax-free bucket. Tell us again those three things. And if you stall on the third one, I'm here to help you.
Municipal bonds, Roths, whether they are traditional Roths, which are, we call them Roth contributory, or Roth conversions. And the third category is life insurance.
Absolutely. And so, all these are available to most people. And one of the things, just a little deeper on the municipal bonds, of course, is that municipal bonds do go into that calculation to determine whether or not you're going to, and how much tax you're going to pay on your Social Security. So although municipal bonds are typically tax-free, they do sometimes push other income into a taxable category, which makes them look a lot like they're taxed in a fashion. So,
Great point.
yeah. So, again, when you're working with your financial professional, make sure that your accountant is part of that team, because you really got to calculate, through how, in fact, that works. So, let's talk also, JJ, a little bit more about the required minimum distributions. Give us the rundown on that, because you had mentioned that earlier, and how this all plays into this tax triangle.
Retired minimum distribution comes about because it's money that's in the taxed later bucket. It doesn't apply to the tax now. It doesn't apply to the tax never. And Congress is a little bit concerned, I suspect, and I'm going to be a bit facetious with this comment, I bet. Congress is a little bit concerned that they wouldn't get their due taxes from us before we died, so they put an age in there where whether we needed the money or not, we have to start taking it. And that is the wonderful age of 70 and a half.
Right.
The calculation is far more complicated than a simple percent, but when you grind it down to a percentage, for a person who goes over, when they turn 70 and a half, they're probably going to have to take out about 3.5% of whatever's in their qualified money in that tax later bucket. I want to make another point when I'm finished with this one, but most of the money that's in the tax later bucket is going to be drawn on at 3.7%. Each year that percentage will go up by about 0.2%. Now for one additional piece of information. The tax later bucket can also include a product called annuities that are not IRAs. It's a thing we call non-qualified annuities. You would have put in $10,000 somewhere in the past history. It's accumulated over the years. You haven't paid any taxes on it, and you don't really need the money.
Right.
When you hit 70 and a half, if you have a non-qualified annuity, you don't have to take money out of that tax later product.
Right.
But when it passes down to the next generation, it's taxable to the extent that interest was earned on it during that deferral period.
So in your example, if you put $10,000 and it's worth $30,000, that $20,000 of gain is going to be taxed to someone along the way. But a great point, not subject to the required minimum distributions. And as you said, those that are in the tax never bucket, like Roth IRAs, do not have to be taken out at 70 and a half. You can continue to defer them as well. So,
well, speaking of those Roth IRAs, actually, Scott, many people think if they're retired or because they're retired and they're not earning any income, they can't have a Roth IRA. Is that, are we missing the boat on something there?
Well, actually, people do think a bit categorically about this. So the truth of the matter is that they can get a Roth IRA through conversion. So, for instance, if they don't have any earned income, then they can't do a contribution. And I know the words sound similar, but the active contribution is available to people with earned income. If you are working part-time and you have income, you can do contribution. But if you have qualified dollars like a regular IRA or a 401k, you can actually convert some of those dollars over to a Roth. And JJ said this earlier, what's the price of conversion? Well, the price of conversion is you got to pay tax on those dollars now in order to get it into the tax never bucket. We actually do a little calculation to figure out what is the break-even time on that. You know, so for some people, the break-even point might be 4 or 5 years because they pay the tax up front, and that tax-free nature is very, very helpful to them, but there's a cost up front. The smart way to do it for most people is to figure out what tax bracket they're in, how much room they have in that tax bracket, use that up. So it might only be $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 per year that you are converting in order to not bump you into the higher tax bracket. But I encourage people also take a look at the changes that are on the horizon in taxes, because you might be headed for some other bracket in 2013 and beyond. So yeah, that's the real difference on the Roths, is the difference between conversion and contribution. Now, and some people will also say, I didn't know you could still convert, because there was a special deal 2 years ago here that allowed you to convert with special circumstances, and that is not available. But your standard conversion is in play, and there is no income limitation for your conversion. So it doesn't matter at what dollar amount, because for many years there was an income limitation that said you can't convert these if you earn over a particular dollar amount on your AGI, and that's gone. So you can still do the conversion regardless of your income.
We're going to talk about life insurance coming up next. This is Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell, our guest today, JJ. We're talking about the tax triangle, life insurance, and a wrap-up of the show coming up next.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. We're getting to wrap up this week's edition. Thanks for tuning in. Scott in studio with us today, and our guest, JJ.
Yep.
JJ, thanks again for coming in, by the way.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome.
Great to have your years of experience and all the wisdom shared with our listeners. And I'm going to just again tell people where how they can get this brochure. It's called Start Seeing Your Financial Future in 3D. And you can just refer to it when you call in for it as the 3D brochure. But here's
no 3D glasses needed.
No 3D glasses are needed. Thank you. And it is a toll-free number to get it is 1-855-346-4332. Just leave us a name and an address and hopefully a phone number so that we can verify the name and the address and get it to you. And we'll get it out to you this week. It's a really good brochure, and it's very much about what we were talking about here today. So if you say, I kind of get it, but I want more information, call right now. And we'll get that out to you here in the next week. Also, if you're interested in more information by one of our events, go to thrivent.com/find an event, and they'll all be listed. You can register right online. So JJ Johnson is with us here today, and JJ, we've been talking about the three things that are in the categories of tax never, that being, of course, Roth IRAs, life insurance, as well as municipal bonds. And, I know that people that are in their 60s and 70s and 80s think that life insurance is for much younger people. So how do life insurance programs work for somebody who's, over 60 years old? How's that work?
An interesting thing that occurred to me, given my current age in the mid-60s now, a few years ago I realized when I was talking to elder people who are older than me, clients of mine, that they wanted a couple of things and there was a couple of things they didn't want.
Right.
One of the things they wanted was they wanted a place to live. And another thing they wanted is they wanted some life insurance just in case something happens.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. What they didn't want is a mortgage.
Right.
And they didn't want a life insurance premium.
Sure.
So they wanted the benefits, but they didn't want the payment.
Tax-free benefit to either their spouse, often to their spouse, or to their heirs when they get a little bit older.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or their charity.
Yeah, or their charity.
Beyond that, some people are not so fortunate as to when they hit retirement that they end up with a paid-off mortgage. So one of the reasons why people in their mid-60s or 70s and are retired, if they're carrying a debt, life insurance is a good tool to still have to take care of that debt, whether it be credit card debt, an automobile loan, or a mortgage upon their passing. That's no different than somebody who's 25 years of age. Likewise, many times people in their 20s and 30s look at life insurance as a way to replace some of their income when they pass on
Right.
to their families, a percent of their income for a number of years. That also does occur to people who have retired because at a minimum, you're going to lose something equivalent to the smallest Social Security check if for a married couple.
Right, and
So,
that can have a huge difference. I mean, I was talking to a couple here this week where they're both going to collect about 20,000 plus of Social Security. Okay, so those two numbers together came up with about $42,000 per year of a Social Security benefit, and then on top of that, they had another 20,000 coming in from other investments, so that they were up to about 62,000. Well, all of a sudden, if one of them dies, then they're back to that. The survivor's back to 42, from 65 down to like 42. That's a measurable measurable fall, I should say, in that income for that surviving spouse. It's questionable whether that'll work. So exactly your point.
And on top of what Scott just spoke to, when we go to filing our taxes as married filing jointly, and we have to go to filing single because of widowhood,
right?
The amount of taxable income that one can have is usually cut in half for each tax bracket. So the real rotten dilemma for widowers is that they will end up with less income because of the loss of Social Security, and more than likely they'll pay more income tax than they were as a married couple. I find that lots of times, and when people find that out, they're not happy, and the time to find out about that is while you're both alive and can do something about it, instead of when you see your tax person that first year you file as a single person.
Right, and if not more total tax, there's certainly, or in most cases, going to be in a higher tax bracket.
Right.
On a lesser dollar amount. Yeah. So yeah.
And the other piece that people like to look at that life insurance as a piece in the corner of the tax never bucket is because it is a way in which they can make significant gifts to charity.
Right.
Many people have some charities that are near and dear to their hearts. They'd like to do something. They'd like to make a gift of some significance post-death, and but they also don't want to do that necessarily at the expense of their kids and their grandkids. So taking the required minimum distributions that you have to take out, and if you don't need to spend it for living or giving away during lifetime, looking at using that to fund the life insurance to increase your estate in a very tax-efficient manner makes sense to a lot of people.
Absolutely. We actually had a discussion on this last week, and what we gave away last week was a brochure called Charitable Optimization. And if our listeners listened last week and they still want that one, they can call that same phone number that we've been giving out and ask for that brochure as well, because it's really, I think, a very, very good brochure.
So there are some benefits to investing in life insurance if you're older, maybe 60, 70, 80. Scott, are there drawbacks to that same thing?
Well, certainly one of the things that older folks face is they might not still be insurable. So they might say, I really get the concept, I really like it, I like the tax-free proceeds to either my spouse or my heirs, but they might have some medical issues that would cause them to be uninsurable. But there are different medical underwriting requirements based on different kinds of life insurance. So some life insurance, there's a category out there in our industry called single premium life insurance, where you put a lump sum in. And then the death benefit is really not, astronomically higher than the amount that you contribute. It's certainly higher to qualify as life insurance, but when you do that, there's potentially less underwriting, so that with maybe a few maladies in your health, you might still be able to get it. You won't know till you try. That's the key point on that one. And there are some types that actually lack some liquidity. One of the things I encourage people to do if they're taking a look at life insurance and they're above 60 is to take a look at what is my surrender value in the first few years of this contract, and what are the penalties or surrender charges that are associated with it. Because if you got a huge surrender charge in the first, second, third, fourth year, that should tell you something. What it's telling you is that the agent that's proposing that is getting a really big commission. Now, that by itself doesn't make it a bad thing, but you should know. So take a look at those things where some of the others you're going to say, whoa, you mean I can actually get out of this contract what I put in, and I shouldn't say the period of time because it depends upon your age and other things, but sometimes it's a very short period of time. You can get back exactly what you put in, and that'll tell you something about the contract and how it's constructed. So,
and most of the time you could look at it as a good life insurance contract is if your heirs are going to get more money out of it than you put into it.
Right.
That would move it into the good arena.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I say, I wouldn't disqualify it just for these reasons, but I think people need to go into these things with their eyes wide open. These strategies can, really be remarkable in terms of how they affect someone's both estate plan and income tax planning. Yep. So, let's do a real quick summary here, JJ. What would you hope that people learned from today's show? What are the quick ideas for them?
Do your income tax planning at Halloween time, not at Easter. Look at that tax triangle with the idea of how you can get money. Do you have more money in the tax later column than is healthy for you? Another thing that I didn't say specifically, but I want to drive home at this point, is by taking an income tax deduction today, are you causing more taxes for you tomorrow?
Right.
It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's another piece that's got to go into it.
Yep.
And when you're looking at how much an investment is going to return to you, you almost have to look at the tax implications on distribution as to whether or not what the total return on this investment is going to be.
Very good. JJ, thanks for being with us here today. This was really great stuff. And I, again, encourage people to call this number to get today's free brochure. And it is Start Seeing Your Financial Future in 3D. You can call 1-855-346-4332, and we'll get that out to you immediately. Thanks so much for being with us.
We'll see you next week. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, JJ.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.